2021, 23-year-old Lauren Smith Fields was found dead in her Bridgeport, Connecticut apartment after a date with a man she had just met on Bumble, and her family says the police botched the investigation. On December 11th, 2021, a young black woman named Lauren Smith Fields went on a date with Matthew LaFountain, a man she had met on the dating app Bumble. The two spent the evening drinking and playing games at Smith Fields' apartment in Bridgeport, Connecticut. But when LaFountain woke up the next morning, Smith Fields was dead. He called the police, who arrived on the scene and immediately cleared him of any wrongdoing. They didn't thoroughly search the apartment, and although they found Smith Fields' ID card and passport, they didn't notify her family that she had died. The following day, Smith Fields' mother, Chantel Fields, stopped by her daughter's apartment after becoming worried that she hadn't heard from her in 2 days. She only found out that her child was dead when Smith Fields' landlord informed her. Since Smith Fields' death, her family has been protesting against the Bridgeport Police Department's handling of the investigation. The accusations of inaction, misconduct, and negligence even have some calling the case a textbook example of missing white woman syndrome. Lauren Quinique Smith Fields was just 23 years old on December 11, 2021, when she invited Matthew LaFountain over to her Bridgeport apartment. She was a student at Norwalk Community College and had dreams of becoming a physical therapist, according to her obituary. A young woman with a bubbly personality, Smith Fields loved her family, passion, and travel. LaFountain told police that he and Smith Fields had met on Bumble several days prior to their date. That night at her apartment, the two took tequila shots, played games, and were watching a movie when she stepped outside to give her brother, Lakeem Jeter, a basket of his clothes. According to Rolling Stone, LaFountain claimed that when Smith Fields returned, she went into the bathroom for 10 to 15 minutes, then fell asleep on the couch while finishing the movie. He carried her to bed, fell asleep beside her, and woke up around 3 a.m. to hear her snoring. When LaFountain woke up again at 6:30 a.m., Smith Fields was lying on her right side. Blood was coming out of her right nostril onto the bed, and she was not breathing. He called police, who questioned him but determined that he'd played no role in her death. They took Smith Fields' phone, keys, passport, and $1,345 in cash from her apartment and left without even trying to reach out to her family. Lauren Smith Fields' mother wouldn't learn about her death until more than 24 hours later, and it wasn't the police who told her. On December 13, 2021, Chantel Fields grew worried that she hadn't heard from her daughter in a few days. Smith Fields was supposed to be hosting Christmas dinner soon, and Fields hadn't been able to reach her to discuss the plans. Fields decided to drive to Lauren Smith Fields' apartment to see if she was home. When she arrived, she found a note on the door that read, "If you're looking for Lauren, call this number." Fields called, and Smith Fields' landlord informed her that her daughter had been found dead the previous morning. sounds, I started panicking. All I could do was just stand there like if I was frozen. I could not believe what he was telling me, that my baby was gone. Fields and her son, who had ridden to the apartment with her, called the police detective on the case, Kevin Cronin, who said he'd be there in 30 minutes, didn't show up, and hung up when they tried to call back. Fields told Rolling Stone how they spoke to us was disgusting, hanging up the phone and telling us to stop calling him. Officer Cronin needs to lose his job. When the family was finally able to get in touch with the police again, they informed them that Smith Fields had been on a date at the time of her death, but not to worry because he was a quote-unquote really nice guy, and there was, quote, no need to investigate. Chantel Fields decided that if police weren't going to thoroughly investigate her daughter's death, she would do it herself. She went into the apartment and saw that while police had confiscated Smithfield's cash and phone, they hadn't collected any other evidence. She found a used condom, bloody sheets, and a mysterious pill. Despite these discoveries, police reportedly still failed to submit the evidence to forensics, and it wasn't until the end of January, over a month later, that they opened a criminal investigation into Smithfield's death. 6 weeks after Lauren Smithfields died, the chief medical examiner released her cause of death as acute intoxication due to the combined effects of fentanyl, promethazine, hydroxyzine, and alcohol. It was ruled accidental. However, countless unanswered questions remained. Why had police failed to notify Smithfield's family of her death? Why had the man who was with her when she died been immediately dismissed as a person of interest? And why had no real evidence been taken from the scene? These questions led Smithfield's family to hire attorney Darnell Crossland and sue the city of Bridgeport for failing to properly investigate the circumstances surrounding the young woman's death. According to NPR, Crossland said, "I've never seen a medical examiner conclude a mixture of drugs as an accident without knowing who provided the drugs or how it was ingested. Lauren didn't use drugs." Chantel Fields confirmed Crossland's statement, saying, "She was not on drugs. She worked out every day. She was on a plant-based diet." Even her brother Jeter, who saw Smithfields just an hour before she died, noted that she seemed perfectly fine when they spoke. She looked normal. She didn't look sick. She didn't look tired. She didn't look drunk. I'm her second older brother. If I would have seen her drunk, I would have said, "What are you doing? Why do you look like that?" Crossland is convinced that the police have been racially insensitive throughout the investigation, and he is determined to get answers for Smithfield's family. Supporters of the lawsuit say the case is a clear example of missing white woman syndrome, or the practice of police and media focusing on cases involving young, attractive, wealthy white women while largely ignoring the same crimes when women of color are the victims. Smithfield's family was determined to make sure her case wasn't forgotten. On January 23rd of 2022, Smithfield's 24th birthday, they marched outside of the Bridgeport mayor's office, released balloons, and sang happy birthday to their daughter, sister, niece, cousin, and friend. Soon after, on January 30th, Detective Cronin under an internal affairs investigation. Mayor Joe Ganim had requested this through the city's deputy police chief. In late May, Detective Cronin quietly returned to duty. According to the Connecticut Post, the police union confirmed the city decided not to arbitrate the case and reinstated him to full duty. Despite this, Smithfield's family continues to fight for answers about her death and the investigation that followed. Crossland said, "We will not stop until we get justice for Lauren and the thousands of black girls that go missing in this country every year. We owe them equal rights and justice regardless of race, and we won't stop fighting until we get it." Philip Chism was just 14 when he murdered his 24-year-old math teacher, Colleen Ritzer, at Danvers High School before dumping her corpse behind the school. On October 22nd of 2013, a ninth grader at Danvers High School in Massachusetts named Philip Chism did the unthinkable. At just 14, he brutalized his 24-year-old math teacher, Colleen Ritzer. The reportedly joyful Ritzer was known to go out of her way to help her students with math and had asked Chism to stay after school that fateful day in October. She did not know the plot Chism had put into motion days before. At the end of the school day, Chism followed Ritzer into a school toilet. Wielding a box cutter, Chism robbed, raped, and killed her, then rolled her body in a garbage can to the woods behind the school. Chism then took himself into town and bought a movie ticket using Ritzer's credit card. When police caught him the following morning, Chism had not washed his hands and still had Ritzer's blood all over them. Philip Chism was born on January 21st of 1999. In the fall of 2013, Chism had recently moved from Tennessee to Danvers, Massachusetts, where he wasn't that well known at school apart from being a good soccer player. One report did refer to him as antisocial and really tired and out of it. It was also reported that his mother was going through a difficult divorce at the time of the crime. Ritzer, meanwhile, was a beloved member of the faculty. According to one struggling student, she was always positive and happy. "She made me feel like I wanted to go to math class," they reported to the New York Times. And Chism was no exception to her. A student overheard Ritzer complimenting Chism on his drawing skills at the end of class and then requested that he stay after school so she could help him prepare for an upcoming test. Chism then reportedly grew visibly upset at Ritzer when she mentioned his move from Tennessee, according to Boston Magazine. Ritzer consequently changed the subject, but the student witness later observed Chism apparently talking to himself. On the morning of October 22nd, 2013, the Danvers High School's newly installed security camera system showed 14-year-old Chism arriving at school with several bags, which he then placed into his locker. Contained within his bags were a box cutter, mask, gloves, and a change of clothing. According to the New York Times, the school security footage showed Ritzer exiting the classroom toward the second-floor women's bathroom at around 2:54 p.m. Chism can then be seen walking into the hallway looking her way, then ducking back into the classroom and re-emerging with his hood over his head. Trailing Ritzer, Chism pulled on gloves as he entered the same bathroom. Chism proceeded to rob Ritzer of her credit cards, iPhone, and her underwear before raping and stabbing her 16 times in the neck with the box cutter. A female student entered the bathroom at one point, but glimpsing and thinking someone was partially unclothed with a pile of garments on the floor, she quickly left, thinking they were getting changed. Chism appeared in several different outfits throughout the crime, which police later said showed how he'd planned the murder in advance. At 3:07 p.m., Chism left the bathroom with a hood over his head and walked outside to the parking lot. When he came back in 2 minutes later, he was wearing a new white t-shirt. Chism then went back to the classroom in a different red hooded sweatshirt over his head, then returned to the bathroom at 3:16 p.m., pulling a recycling bin. He re-emerged in the white t-shirt and a black mask, pulling the bin with Ritzer's body toward an elevator and then outside of the school. He dragged the bin all the way to a wooded area behind the school, where he raped Ritzer's lifeless body again, but with a tree branch. Cameras then picked Chism up coming back into the school, wearing a black shirt and glasses and carrying a pair of bloody jeans, completing his macabre fashion show. When neither Chism nor Ritzer were seen after school, they were both reported missing. After speaking with students and staff at the school, police found blood in the bathroom, Ritzer's bag, the bloody recycling bin, and Ritzer's bloody clothing near the cross-country path, the woods behind the school. By 11:45 p.m., the CCTV footage was acquired and scoured, and Chism became a suspect. Meanwhile, Chism used Ritzer's credit card to buy a movie ticket, then left the theater to steal a knife from another store. He was walking along a darkened highway outside Danvers when he was stopped by police on a routine safety call at 12:30 a.m. A frisk search of Chism for identification turned up Ritzer's credit card and driver's license. Chism was taken to the local station where his backpack was searched and Ritzer's purse and underwear were found alongside the box cutter covered with dried blood. According to court documents, when Chism was asked whose blood it was, he said, "It's the girl's." When asked if he knew where she was, he chillingly replied, "She's buried in the woods." At 3 a.m., police discovered the gruesome sight of Ritzer's half-naked body covered with leaves near a pair of stained white gloves. A branch had to be pulled from her vagina, and a folded handwritten note lay nearby worded, "I hate you all." Philip Chism was indicted for the murder, aggravated rape, and armed robbery of Colleen Ritzer. He was tried as an adult, and on February 26 of 2016, he was sentenced to serve at least 40 years in prison. Ever since Tiffany Valiante of Mays Landing, New Jersey, was gruesomely killed by an oncoming train in 2015, suicidal. They believe that New Jersey Transit claimed she stepped onto the tracks to avoid accusations of negligence and insist that the authorities bundled their investigation into her death. What's more, unsettling rumors pervaded the girl's town in the aftermath of her death. One local store manager even came forward to say that his teenage employees had been sharing stories about how Valiante had been abducted and forced onto the train tracks. In the days, weeks, and months leading up to Tiffany Valiante's death on July 12, 2015, the 18-year-old had a number of personal struggles. As the Daily Beast reports, she and her mother Diane had clashed to the point that Child Protective Services visited their home 3 times in 2014. Then Diane admitted to punching her in the arm during an argument. They both agreed to attend a counseling session, during which Valiante told her therapist that she was neither depressed nor suicidal. The therapist ultimately found that she had a stable family relationship. But if Tiffany Valiante's family life was stable, her life outside the home was anything but. According to the Daily Beast, she responded to her grandfather's death by smoking pot, stealing money, and skipping class. In early 2015, she came out as gay and started dating women, and Valiante expressed feelings of loneliness to her friends, who told investigators that she had self-harmed. Still, Valiante seemed to have bright hopes for her future. She had won a volleyball scholarship and had plans to attend Mercy College in New York State. According to WHYY, she was mulling pursuing a career in criminal justice or even joining the Air Force. But before she could start her freshman year, Tiffany Valiante died in a horrifying fashion. Though no one knows exactly what happened to Tiffany Valiante on July 12th of 2015, a couple of facts are known. On that date, she attended a graduation party with her parents, Diane and Steve. At around 9 p.m., one of her friends asked to speak to Diane and Steve and told them back at the Valiante home that Valiante had been using her debit card. The conversation lasted less than 10 minutes, and that Valiante denied the accusation, though a receipt from the card was later found in her room. According to WHYY, she and her parents discussed the incident after her friend left, an interaction her mother described as more of a squabble than a blowout fight. But then, while searching Valiante's car, Diane saw her daughter slip the debit card in question into her pocket. She went inside to get Steve, and when they returned, their daughter had disappeared. She was out by the car, Diane told WHYY. I walked inside to get my husband. I only left her for 1 minute. I walked back out. She wasn't there. What happened to Tiffany Valiante from that point? No one knows. As time passed and she didn't return, her parents launched a search that turned up Valiante's cell phone, apparently discarded at the end of their driveway. Tiffany never went anywhere without her cell phone, Diane told WHYY, explaining that her daughter had even gotten a waterproof case so that she could use her phone in the shower. By 11:30 p.m., her parents were so alarmed that they called the police, but it was too late. 27 minutes earlier, a New Jersey Transit train traveling southbound at 80 miles per hour had hit Valiante such force that all 4 of her limbs were torn from her body. When they first came to the house to tell us, I made them repeat themselves because I just was in shock, Diane told WHYY. They just said she was hit by a train. They didn't tell us anything else. We thought she was in a car with someone, that the car got hit. That's what we initially thought. We were like, oh God, who else was in the car? By the next day, investigators officially closed the case. They claimed that Tiffany Valiante had thrown herself in front of the tracks and died by suicide. But as time went on, a number of other clues emerged that suggested that the truth could be more complicated. A couple of things about Tiffany Valiante's death seemed odd from the beginning. For starters, she was found barefoot and wearing just her underwear, but her family initially accepted the investigators' findings and had her body cremated. Worst decision of my life, Diane told WHYY through tears. I just assumed the investigators did what they were supposed to do. Diane began to doubt the official conclusion about Valiante's death about 2 weeks after her daughter died. Then, while wandering grief-stricken through the woods near her home, Diane stumbled across her daughter's missing shoes and headband in a neat pile. They were nowhere near where bloodhounds had tracked her scent and more than a mile from where she had died on the train tracks. This struck Valiante's parents as odd, as her autopsy found nothing about her feet that suggested she'd walked a mile without wearing shoes. Looking at Tiffany's feet, they were as pristine as my little granddaughter's feet, the Valiante family lawyer Paul D'Amato told WHYY. There's no cuts, there's no abrasions, there's nothing. From there, other issues with the investigation into the girl's death rose to the surface. The Daily Beast reports that much of the evidence collected by investigators had been improperly stored and become contaminated, including Valiante's shirt, and NJ Transit had recovered an axe with red marks from the scene, which they later lost. NJ Transit lost the axe, D'Amato told NJ. How do you lose an axe? D'Amato also pointed out that Marvin Olivares, who was driving the train on the night of Valiante's death, changed his story a number of times. Olivares first described how she had quote-unquote darted in front of the train, then said he didn't see her until it was too late, then claimed that the girl had been crouching by the tracks. D'Amato and others believe that NJ Transit pushed the suicide theory to avoid accepting blame for her death. What's more, strange rumors started to spread in town about what had happened to Tiffany Valiante. According to the Daily Beast, a Wawa manager told investigators that he'd heard his teenage employees talking about how she had been abducted at gunpoint, forced to strip, and chased onto the train tracks. He implied that the friend who accused Valiante of using her debit card had somehow been involved in her abduction. A number of teenagers were interviewed by investigators. They claimed to have no knowledge of what had happened to Tiffany Valiante, and D'Amato led the charge in 2017 for authorities to reevaluate the case. While we strongly believe Valiante was murdered, the complaint allows for the possibility that the co-conspirators did not intend to kill her, but that their violent actions still resulted in her death, D'Amato said in 2017. One way or another, they were responsible Tiffany Valiante's death remains officially listed as a suicide, but her family and their supporters refuse to believe that she had dropped her phone, walked 4 miles, and threw herself in front of a moving train. They're hoping that Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries, which is set to feature her death in 2022, will bring renewed attention to their cause. When you look at everything that we have so far, you walk away and you say, "It wasn't suicide," D'Amato told WHYY. But then you just can't stop there. You say, "Okay,